All right. I like to say, good evening, everybody. It is 19? 2:19. Now let me look at my watch and see what today's date is. Today's date is February the 19th, 2021. It's about 9 o'clock at night. And I'm doing a stream. The stream is called NAAA 12-Step Recovery, a comparison of steps 1, 2, and 3, and their differences and how they differ. But at the same time, because they differ, my aim is to point out how and why, especially step 2 and step 3. So let's get into this thing. Let's get into it. Okay, my name is Sammy. I am an individual in recovery, and I've been in recovery for some 36 years and about 8 months. That being said, I've heard a lot of things in the room in the recovery communities, and I want to actually talk about how I learned recovery. And understand this, I did not teach myself. I had people that actually helped me out. So first we're gonna start off with the keys to the steps. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And for the purpose of recovery, honesty will be viewed from my perspective as not only having a mission of truth, but also a consistent behavior to follow that admission, whether it's positive or negative. It's just only being honest. So there's a verbal admission, and then there's a behavior that's consistent with the verbiage or whatever the person say. For example, if a person say, "I'm in recovery," then there should be a behavior consistent with that. All right? Open-mindedness, or being open-minded. Being open-minded is pretty much subjective. In other words, you can have your own opinion. You can maintain your own opinion while listening to something else. And if it's something there that you can use inside that other opinion or opinions, you take what you need and leave the rest. And willingness. And willing is being, check this out, open to try something different. It's being prepared to try something different or something new. So with that being said, I'm gonna jump into steps 1, 2, and 3. Now, what happened in step 1? A lot of times when I'm sitting in the meeting and I hear people say, we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. And in the big book, I believe that word there is alcoholism or alcohol. So that being said, and I gotta say this, what happened in Narcotics Anonymous, they took the focus off the alcohol. They said, no, we just gonna say addiction. So for the purpose of simplicity, I'm going to say alcohol or alcoholism is obsessive thinking and compulsive behavior. That would be the same definition that I apply to addiction. Why? Because the steps originated from where? From AA. And the reason why NA changed the steps around, they said, well, we want to take the focus off the alcoholism and put it more on addiction. But for the purpose of of my videos or my streams, alcohol and addiction mean the same thing. All right, so moving on, which is obsessive thinking and compulsive behavior or sporadic behavior. So in step one, it says, we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. Now, it doesn't say the symptom. Doesn't say the symptom. Or it's not meant to point to a symptom. And in the AA's case, alcohol. Alcohol is a smaller picture of a bigger picture. In other words, it's a symptom of a greater disease called alcoholism. ISM. Alcoholism. And it's very simply, an ism is something that someone believes and practices. Like communism, like socialism, like Islamism, which I ain't never heard of before. But I just put that out there. So moving on, the focus is not on the symptom, the mere symptom. It's focused, the focus is really on the addiction or the alcoholism. That's the focus. But a lot of people, they'll come into the rooms and they'll talk about, they'll focus on either the alcohol or they'll focus on the gambling or they'll focus on the drugs or they'll focus on, you know, what, or even what type of drug it was. You know, marijuana, you know, I smoked a lot of marijuana. I took a lot of pills, Xanax or whatever. I took some heroin or some cocaine. And as a matter of fact, you also have fellowships that, you know, Cocaine Anonymous and so forth. So therefore, the focus, what people will put on is the symptom, what I call the symptom, and that's the drug. But we can also apply this terminology, this powerlessness, to what? To gambling, to food, to sex, to drama, to fantasy. It could be applied to any manifestation of the addiction / the alcoholism. Yeah. And so when it said in the step, we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable, a lot of people think it was the drug, or it was the food, or it was the gambling, or it was the alcohol. I say no, no, no. It was the addiction. It was the obsessive thinking and the compulsive behavior that the individual was powerless over. And I said was because in the step it says we admitted, ED. There was they're saying is that we admitted that we were, and it's used the word were, past tense. Powerless over our addiction, that our lives, what? Had, HAD, all that's past tense, become unmanageable. So what is this step really saying? In layman's terms, it's saying that you had an experience, and let me back up. I'll say the individual, and I'll also say the groups, because groups can become addicted. Yes, they can. All you have to do is look at any type of riot, and you will see addiction in its pure form. All types of chaos and calamities going on. So that being said, what step one is saying is what I'm doing is I see my experience in my what? In my addiction, in my alcoholism or my alcoholic behavior. That's what I see. And I'm making that admission. In other words, I am admitting to myself about an experience that I had. I am no longer in what? Denial. So through the admission, what I'm saying is I'm going to a point of what? Surrender. But let me back up. Let me back up. And if I can't find my quick notes, I'm just going to write it on down. In order to come out the addiction and the alcohol, there's a 4-stage experience that must take place. And first, we're in denial. So let me say this. The first step, the first part is denial. And let me say this. If I equate my symptom to the disease or the alcoholism, I'm still in denial of the what? Of the addiction or the alcoholism. Because why? I'm not going to the core of what's really going on. Therefore, I will have a what? A reservation in my program. My mission will not be what? My mission will not be concrete because I'm not at the core. And so in step one, what's happening is I'm taking a look at my bottom. I'm taking a look at my bottom. I'm taking a look at how my bottom, my last days of using alcohol or drugs, how my addiction, my obsessive and compulsive thinking, my compulsive behavior brought me where? To my knees. It brought me to my knees. It got me to a point that I admitted not that the drugs or the alcohol was the problem, but that the alcoholism or the addiction was my primary problem. And then from the denial, I go to admittance. One day I'm gonna have a board right behind me, right? I'm gonna have a board right behind my marker book, and I'll be able to write this stuff down. So, or display it. So that being said, what has happened is I come from denial to admittance. And then as I, let me turn now my phone acting up. Now, as I get to the admittance part, I'm still not clear yet. I'm still not in the recovery process yet. But I admit through my own experience that I have a problem with the addiction or the alcoholism through the recovery. Through the symptom. And check this out. The symptom, like I said, could be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be food, it could be sex, it could be gambling, it could be risk-taking, it could be whatever it is, whatever symptom that's activated that's connected to my addiction. But it will manifest through what? Through my bottom. That's why in the second step, it says, number one, I was powerless. And the powerlessness is manifested in the symptom, but it's linked directly to the addiction. Is linked directly to the addiction and alcoholism. And what's that we? Let's talk about the we. The we, if I'm in a recovery group, is the collective experience of the group. We are talking about what our experience was with that. And we could be sharing it to a new person, or we could be sharing it to a visitor, or even among ourselves. That's what that we is. But then there's another part of that we. The admission comes mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Why? Because that's how the addiction and that's how the alcoholism affects the individual and the group on all four levels. So the first effect, and I'm not saying it in this particular order, but the first effect is with what? It's a group experience. Why? Because when we get together as groups, we share what? Our experiences, our strengths, and our hopes. And by step one being a step of experience. And it's an honor. We're sharing honestly about our what? Our experiences with what? Addiction and alcoholism through the symptoms. We hit the bottom. And how do I know we hit bottom? Why? Because in the second part of that stuff, it says that our lives had, not is, had become unmanageable. Had become unmanageable. And unmanageable means that I of my own self was incapable of handling my personal affairs that allowed me to sustain a purpose living. In other words, we call it being a responsible person. And the next part of that unmanageability is the insanity of my life. The insanity that's going on in my life. That's what this step is talking about. So what did I have to do? I had to come from denial to admittance to acceptance. And once I begin to accept what's going on, I'm still in step one now. Once I begin to accept what's going on, and when I accept something, I'm taking responsibility, right? There's no blaming. There's no blaming in the game. I'm not blaming father. I'm not blaming society. I'm not blaming mother. I'm taking full responsibility of my life. Once I assume personal responsibility, and when I say personal, I mean mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Once I accept that responsibility, what happens is I go to the next level and I surrender. I throw my hands up. I said, my life is insane. It's unmanageable. I can't maintain myself or a standard of living without the assistance of somebody else. And let me put that in there for those that's capable of maintaining their lifestyle because they got that kind of financial support. So what happens in step two, it says, we came to. And let me stop. Let me go back. Because coming from denial to admittance to acceptance to surrender, then I make a choice. I enter into the recovery process because, see, this is what can happen. When I get from denial to admittance to admittance to acceptance to surrender, I can say I'm going to stop using. I can say I'm going to stop using food. I can say I'm going to stop using drugs. I can say I'm going to stop using alcohol. I can say that I can stop using, or I'm going to stop gambling, or I'm going to stop my addiction to drama and excitement, my obsessive thinking, and my compulsive behavior. But I don't have to enter into recovery. I don't have to make a choice to enter into recovery. So let's go to step two. And I'm going to hold on to recovery because that is the fifth element. So in step two, we say what? It says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So let me start at the beginning. In NA, the we is still present. However, in AA, they say the we is still there because once you got that we in the first step, the we is all through the rest of the steps. I'm not going to argue with that. If that's what it is, that's what it is. But we're going to still use that we the same way as we did in step 2. When we are together as a fellowship or a group, the we is what? Collective. We're sharing all of our collective experiences as to this particular step in the program period. So it says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So I want to back up. I want to back up back into the 80s when AA had a pamphlet out, a second step. It was not a pamphlet. As a matter of fact, it was a golden book. It was called a golden book. And it was on step 2. And what it said is we came to. We came to. So in step 2, what I'm hinting at is that we came to through the experience of step 1. And that came to it, we came into consciousness. There was a that was the first spiritual, and I ain't gonna even say it's the first one, but simplicity, it was a spiritual awakening as a result of my experience to step 1. So in step 2, it says, we came to. We came from a dark place, or we came from a place where we were sleeping to a place of light. We came to mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally / as a collective. That's how we came. And we came to as a result of step 1. Through the whole step 1 experience with what? Not the symptom, although the symptom was the one that took us there, but the mission was on the addiction and the alcoholism. So we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now check this out. So as we move on, and I spoke of the consciousness, and I spoke of a consciousness, it says that a power greater than ourselves. A power, it says a power greater than ourselves. When I say a, that means what? There's more than one power at work out there, or to make the selection from, that I could choose from. It says a power, not the power, nor does it say higher power. And I'm talking about the step. I'm not talking about no narrations. I'm just talking about the step only. So inside the power greater than ourselves, it says could. And could is conditional because if I don't apply the second step right, guess what? The next steps will not work without it. That's in all literature. That's in all. And in the NA literature, it specifically states, if I don't get step 2, the next steps ain't gonna work. In AA, they said a person, if they get step 2, they could they could say they could do the cha-cha, the step 1, step 2, step 1, step 2, step 1. They could 2-step it all the way through the recovery, I ain't gonna say the recovery process, but they could stay what? Sober. That's the term that they use. But I also believe that a person can stay clean. And there's a difference between being sober and being clean, and we'll talk about that later. So anyway, could restores to sanity. And the could is conditional that I understand what step 2 is saying when it says, I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, and it didn't say myself. It says ourselves. So I'm going to leap back to the we again. And inside the we, like I said before, when we're in a group, as a collective, that's the we and the ourselves. But when I'm by myself and I'm working step work alone before I get to my sponsor, that ourselves is me what? Mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Why? Because that's how the disease of alcoholism / addiction has affected my life. On all 4 levels, I was towed down in the first step. That's what the honest admission was. And step 1 is a step of what? Honesty. Step 2 is a step of what? Open-mindedness. So moving on, what is the power greater than ourselves? Well, your own addiction / alcoholism is a power greater than self. Why? Very simple. Go to step 1. And you can look at your primary symptom, and you can look at the addiction / the alcoholism alone. So if you're an alcoholic, you can look at the alcohol, and the alcoholism. The alcoholism, what you practice. If you're an addict, you can look at being powerless over what? Over the addiction, the obsessive thinking, and the compulsive behavior, which resulted in what? Total self-centered behavior. So that being said, there's 2 powers greater than myself. And I'll say this. If you don't believe that your bottom was a power greater than yourself, something that changed your thinking, that you needed to stop doing what you're doing, you need to go back and revisit step 2 and write it all and write those last few days out to the time you hit that bottom / rock bottom. What also happened in step 1 was when I looked at the unmanageability of my life, there was a void that was created through the admittance and acceptance and the surrender. When I surrendered, I said, what? Hands up. What can I do? What do I need to do? And then I start thinking, maybe I need to go to treatment. Maybe I need to get some detox and some withdrawal, go somewhere and detox and withdraw first. I need to get rid of what? My primary symptom. I need to drop that primary symptom. So I can what? So I can get help with my addiction / my alcoholism. Another decision. And this is what step 2 is talking about. So I had an awakening. I became conscious of what? Of my unmanageability and my powerlessness, on how it was really affecting my day-to-day living, my day-to-day affairs of my life. That's how that was. And understand, if I'm talking about addiction, then I'm talking about food, gambling, sex. I'm talking about excitement. I'm talking about drama. I'm talking about being a workaholic. And then the alcoholic says alcohol. And I'm not going to even argue with that. That's not what this particular stream is about. So let's move on. We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So how am I being restored to sanity / how do I get the manageability back in my life? And how do I become, how do I lose the powerlessness? I had to change my way of thinking. And like I said, the bottom changed my way of thinking. Then let's say I start getting around some people like me. I get to the we of the program. I get around people that's sharing their same experiences with me. As I became conscious in step 2, I began to what? To identify. I began to identify. I began to identify with their experiences, what they have experienced through their alcoholism/addiction. And when I listened to those that was clean and sober for a while, guess what? I developed faith, and I asked them, what did you do? What did you do? What did you do, ma'am? What did you do, sir? And what happened was that power greater than myself that restored me to sanity in the moment that supported my surrender, I made a decision what? To recover. To recover. So what step 2, in essence, brought me was consciousness of my moment. And whatever it was that changed my mind, to change my thinking, that's what was brought about, or to have me to observe my thinking, my obsessive thinking and my compulsive behavior as a result of my primary symptom. So let's look at step 3. So let me back up. So I'm saying flat out is that the power greater than myself has nothing to do with a God. It has everything to do with what is restoring me to sanity. Sorry. So let's move on to step 3. Inside of step 3, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Now, what I'm going to say right here, I'm probably going to lose a lot of friends, but you have to understand that the 12-step program is not a religious program. It is a spiritual program based on spiritual principles. That's what it's based on. It's not based on no dogma. But what has happened, and what is happening is that people or members have allowed the dogma of religion to creep in. And now it ain't even crept in. The floodgates is open. So what has happened is a misunderstanding of the steps is taking place, and a lot of people are not recovering. Why? Because they have not taken responsibility for their addiction and their recovery. That's why a lot of people will stop short. They will get to the denial, they will make the admittance, they will take the acceptance, and they will surrender. But they will not reach recovery because of the misunderstanding of we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Well, check that out. Well, Sunni, what is you trying to say, man? What is you trying to say? First, I'm going to come flat out and tell you what the decision should be. When an individual makes a decision to turn their will and their lives over to the care of God, as they understand them, they should just go ahead and work the rest of the program so you can find out how much you really will never understand the G-O-D. And that God, in my view, as taken from AA, simply means good orderly direction. And that being said, good orderly direction, what do you call it? 12-step program. But however, when it says we made a decision to turn our will and our life, what is my will and what is my life? My will is the way I think, and my life is the expression of my thinking. That's the physical manifestation of my thinking. Very short, very, very simple, sweet, and short. Because I've heard a lot of philosophical views on this answer. But all you got to do is just look at it. What is my will? It's the way I think. My life is the physical expression of the way I live. Is the physical expression of how I'm thinking. It's the physical manifestation of how I'm thinking. It's real simple. And then the God of my understanding, it says the God of my understanding, and I believe the intention when that was put in the steps is good. But what happens is, through whatever reason, and a lot of it is really guilt and shame, that people come to, when they come to, check this out, when they come to, they think they came to church, or they came to the mosque, or they came to the synagogue, or they came to the temple. No. Because what was the suggestion that we gave? The suggestion that was given to me, at least when I came here, it was they said, let the power be loving, caring, and what? Greater than myself. Loving, caring, and greater than myself. Why? Because I didn't love myself. Y'all told me. You said, hey, Sunni, we gonna love you till you learn to love yourself. Not y'all was gonna love me till I learned how to love Regina or Billy or Larry or Betty or Sue or Tom or Dick or Harry. Y'all said till I learned to love myself, because one thing y'all knew was, several things y'all knew, that there was love inside of me and the steps would bring it out. That there was love inside of me and the step would bring it out. So y'all said loving and caring, because y'all knew another thing about me is I ain't care about me. So how in the hell I'm gonna care about something else? And then greater than myself. Only thing that greater than myself mean was to check what? My ego. False pride / false pride. So in the third step, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of, and not total to this God. It says to the care of. Why? Because if I turn my life completely over, number one, I would not be in recovery, because I have refused to participate in my own healing. That the recovery process through the steps would bring. I would become irresponsible in my own recovery. So when it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him, I was the one that went somewhere else and bought some other stuff back that didn't have nothing to do with recovery or me being responsible for my own recovery. Because let me say this. So when I be in meetings and I hear people share about death and things they have no control over, you know what they say? Well, you know, my God got this. My God. But they forget about the part where it says care of. It's in the care of. That means that because it's in the care of, there's certain things I'm going to have to do. I like the analogy that somebody gave a long time ago, and I believe it was Vito out of New Jersey. He said, if I get a babysitter for my kids and I leave, the babysitter is still caring for my kids, but they're still mine. I leave a set of directions that do this at this time, do this at this time. Going back to good orderly direction. But a lot of times in the recovery process, when I'm listening to people talk about the God of their understanding, they don't talk about care of. They go straight to God as we understand him. They don't talk about the care. Because the program is saying, what the step is saying is that you have to become an active participant in your own recovery. So, wrapping this deal up, willingness is the primary spiritual principle of step 3. Honesty in step 1, open-mindedness in step 2, and willingness in step 3. And unless I apply these keys to these steps, the spiritual principles will not be unlocked. And if they're not unlocked, guess what? My surrender is in danger. We call it relapse. And some people just ain't stopped using. So I'm going to wrap this little piece up with this. Is that step 1 is different. Step 2 is a whole different step. And step 3 is a different step. Step 1 shows the insanity of my life. Through the addiction, through the alcoholism, at a particular time. Why? Because once I get clean and sober, there's going to be other instances where the disease of addiction and alcoholism will manifest into my life. In step 2, we came to, what happens is I receive my first, and I ain't gonna say my first, what I'm doing is I'm acknowledging the spiritual awakening that I got in step 1. I became what? Conscious. I came up I began my journey from the dark grip of addiction and alcoholism. My dark journey of food and sex and gambling, still addiction, obsessive and compulsive behavior. And the principles that come along with that. The loneliness, the anxiety, still greater than me. Loneliness, anxiety, desperation, isolation, not motivated, self-deception. Yeah, and the list goes on and on and on of the powers greater than myself. But I can still talk about love, peace, service work. I could talk about those powers too, because they're greater than myself too. Caring, sharing, meditation, prayer. What has happened is that the religious zealots have used power greater than ourselves and also have used a higher power synonymously. And then when people share about it, they try to make them feel guilty, like they don't know what they talking about. But in essence, y'all don't know what y'all talking about. And then your self-centeredness won't allow you to admit that you're wrong because you done shared this way for so many years. And you done cut people down that people went on and formed other groups called agnostics in recovery, atheists in recovery. And then you point the finger at them like they ain't recovering when really they are, because they've taken more responsibility to apply spiritual principles when in essence, a lot of people have just taken the God and say, oh, well, that's the end of the day. I ain't got to recover. But that's why a lot of y'all relapse. It's your story. You don't have an understanding of what a power greater than yourself is because your ego is too big based on your religious dogma that you have allowed to creep in to your program. So wrapping this up, in the comments, leave me some comments. Yeah, leave me some comments. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. My next topic it will be whatever somebody put in the comment, but tomorrow is Sunday, and I'll be back. I'd like to say thanks for letting me share. I hope that this has helped someone. And with that, I'm a person in recovery. My name is Sammy. Thanks for letting me share.